Makes sense. Karen, let's start by talking about Ifosa's experience. I think it was with his project around bringing wells, I think in Nigeria. Will you kind of recreate the story there with your co-author and how that became kind of the crux of the beginning of the book?
Sure. Afosa is from Nigeria originally, but he had been in the United States for a very long time. He came to America on a scholarship and stayed and was doing very well, I think, as a salesman in Wisconsin. And he just, in the course of his life, was reading a book where he had read a story about a 10-year-old girl who, I think it was in Ethiopia, who had to rise at 3 a.m, I think it was, every day to go fetch firewood so she could go to a market and sell it so that she could provide some income for her family, again, for survival. And he was just so profoundly moved by that. That story just shook him, that there could be a 10-year-old girl whose life was like that. And even though he probably knew that from his own experience growing up in Nigeria, it just hit home for him. So he decided personally, I'm going to be part of the solution. I am going to raise money to stop poverty. And he created his own nonprofit called Poverty Stops Now. And his goal was, he looked around and said, what problems can I help solve? And he saw water. The access to clean water was a gigantic problem in lots of places, but certainly in his home country of Nigeria. So he raised from friends and family hundreds of thousands of dollars with the specific goal of they would go and put in functioning wells in various communities in Nigeria. So he and his friends and family who supported him went off and had these wonderful celebratory visits to different villages in Nigeria where they had created a functioning well. And as he describes it in the book and when you talk to him, it was one of the most thrilling feelings of his life. Water is life, and seeing water gushing out of a well where people had previously had to walk miles to a river to clean and get water and things like that, it was exciting. He felt that he personally had made a dent in poverty in his home country. He went back to Wisconsin, his home in Wisconsin, and felt great about what they had accomplished and left in those communities. And then months went by and he'd get a phone call. One of the wells had broken down. So here he is in Wisconsin and he has to figure out, I'm responsible for this well. How am I going to fix it? So he calls around, finds someone to get out to the village, fix it, and then it breaks again and again. And over time, 4 out of the 5 wells that he had installed ended up becoming malfunctioning and not working. And what might have been even more heartbreaking for him is the wells he had installed in a few places were within eyesight of wells that had previously been installed by NGOs or outside organizations as well with the same good intentions that had been defunct and were no longer functioning. And he realized that no matter what, simply sort of throwing resources at a problem that doesn't get solved in any other way is never going to change the equation. It was just the frustration of, I can't just pour money into solving these visible signs of poverty. Something else has to happen. And that's when, as he went on to Harvard Business School and sat in Clay Christensen's class, he began to understand the power of thinking about the problem differently. Not how will we solve poverty, but how can we generate prosperity? Prosperity would create the kind of environment and community that could sustain its own wells and have other businesses and reasons that wells were needed so that it didn't rely on a phone call to somebody in Wisconsin to figure out how to fix it. And that was the beginning of a multi-year research project that he worked on with Clay Christensen, and I joined them on to try to answer this question. How do we generate prosperity?